I think they are because it keeps going off.
1, 2. Okay, ready?
Kendall?
Okay, very good. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go ahead and get started with our meeting. If you would rise, and we're going to do the pledge. Commissioner Shaw Williams is going to lead us in our pledge.
Yes. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Secretary, could we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Patrick,
Here.
Commissioner Rice,
Here.
Commissioner Trejo,
Here.
Commissioner Shaw Williams,
Here.
Chairman Springs.
Here. Any communications from staff?
There are no communications from staff tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments. Anyone wishing to address the Planning Commission or address the Planning Commission on any items on the agenda except the public hearing can do so at this time. Operator, can you open up the phone lines for us?
There are no phones in the queue.
Okay, we're going to close this segment. And Madam Secretary, our first agenda item, please.
Item 5A, public hearing. A public hearing to consider General Plan Amendment 2023-001, GPA 2023-001, the sixth cycle draft 2021 through 2029 Inglewood housing element.
Chairman Springs and Commission, the file is present and the notice has been given in the form and manner as required by law. Staff received no correspondence from the public on this item, and Senior Planner Bernard McCumbee is present to do a short staff presentation.
Good evening, Chairman Springs and members of the Commission. The Inglewood General Plan consists of 8 elements: land use, housing, noise, circulation, conservation, open space, environmental justice, and the safety element. The Inglewood housing element was last updated in 2014 when the City Council adopted the 5th cycle housing element. Like all cities in the Southern California Association of Government, or SCAG for short, region, our housing element expired in October 2021. And like most cities, we're still working to adopt it. The housing element must be updated every 8 years and is subject to review and certification by the California Department of Housing and Community Development. In the SCAG region, which includes Inglewood, the draft housing element establishes housing policies for the planning period of October 2021 through October 2029. The housing element represents the city's long-term commitment to development and improvement of housing in the city of Inglewood. State law requires that local governments do 3 things when adopting the housing element. 1, they must recognize their responsibility in contributing to the attainment of the state's housing goals. 2, they must prepare and implement a housing element that is coordinated with state and federal efforts to provide opportunities for new housing. And finally, local governments must cooperate with other agencies and governments to address regional housing needs. As a part of the public outreach for the housing element, staff, along with our consultants, conducted a number of different outreach techniques. We held virtual meetings, stakeholder interviews. We produced some educational videos that are available on YouTube, and I'll show you an example of one momentarily. We also posted our presentations on our city's website, social media pages, as well as targeted stakeholder outreach and the state required 30-day review period. If I can indulge you for just a few minutes, I would like to show you the video that was produced to educate the general public on what the housing element is.
Welcome to the City of Inglewood's first Housing Element Workshop. You'll leave this workshop with an understanding of what a housing element is, what this year's Housing Element Update means for the City of Inglewood, and why you should participate in the Housing Element Update process.
Hi, excuse me, I have a few questions. I've heard about this. Can you please describe what is exactly a housing element?
A housing element is part of the city's general plan, which is like the city's constitution. A housing element is the highest level of expression of a city's housing vision, including goals, policies, and programs for improving housing.
So essentially, the housing element is a plan for future housing in the city, but housing isn't really a new issue. Why haven't we been talking about this housing element sooner?
Housing elements are required by the state of California to be updated every 8 years. The prior housing element expires this year, and now cities statewide are updating their housing element for the 2021 to 2029 cycle.
So it's been 8 years, okay. Now, what's required by the state?
The state requires cities to plan for a certain number of new housing units to be built over the next 8 years. These new housing units are called the RHNA.
Wait, what's RHNA?
RHNA is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. These units are built across 4 income levels. Additionally, the city is required to locate sites for new housing and adjust zoning where appropriate.
Now, zoning is the rules put forth by the city, the building rules, right?
Right. Zoning describes what can be built in different parts of the city. For example, there are residential, industrial, and commercial zones.
But we're talking about residential housing, right? And so exactly what kind of housing are we talking about?
Housing for all income levels, ranging from folks who are chronically unemployed to folks who earn above the area's median household income. Housing types include ADUs.
Now, these are the granted class.
Yes, also condos, multifamily, and affordable.
Now, when you say affordable, what do you mean by that? And where would it be?
This depends on the site analysis, which will determine where future housing will be planned for. And yes, large portions of the RHNA units are affordable.
Now, many of us already own a home, but we're concerned about our children and our neighbors being able to stay here, even though they're renters, as part of our community. What about them?
Protecting renters is very important to the City of Inglewood, and this housing element will talk about how we will continue to do that. The housing element will identify ways to encourage the development of more affordable housing in the city.
So this is going to be a guide for everything that happens housing-wise throughout the city.
Yes, this housing element will decide the future of housing in Inglewood over the next 8 years. The city wants all of you to give us your comments and feedback.
So any resident can weigh in on this?
Absolutely. Go to the Inglewood Housing Elements webpage to share your thoughts and comments, and be sure to attend future housing element workshops.
Okay. Wow, thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so that was one of 3 videos that was produced. The other 2 videos spoke about zoning, was titled Zoning, Your Questions Answered. And the last video was How Does Affordable Housing Become a Reality? And so we created these videos in an effort to educate the general public on some of these planning issues and spark some conversation as it relates to this housing element cycle. Prior to every housing element cycle, SCAG develops a regional housing needs assessment that was mentioned in the video, which determines the housing need for the region and allocates a number of units that must be accommodated by each local jurisdiction. In the 5th cycle housing element, which is shown on the screen, Inglewood's RHNA was 1,013 units. Fast forward to this 6th cycle housing element, our RHNA is 7,439 housing units. These units must follow a level of affordability which is based on the Los Angeles County median family income thresholds. For example, as stated, extremely low income families would represent less than 30% of the median family income in Los Angeles County. The city of Inglewood would need to provide 906 units over the next 8 years for very low income units. Moving ahead, moderate income, 1,112 units, and above moderate income is well over 3,500. And so those numbers altogether total our RENA requirement of 7,439 units. Now, I want to give you some kudos as a commission, because it should be noted that you, as a result of your leadership, your vision, your oversight as it relates to the adoption of our TOD plans, you've paved the way for the city to meet that RENA. And so, round of applause to you. Thank you. Although the city's not obligated to develop the number of units in the RENA allocation, it is required to ensure that there are sufficient sites available in the community to accommodate that housing need. It's also worth mentioning that the inventory of available sites under the existing zoning designations that include the TOD plans have created a projected 11,453 new units that are potentially available to be built under this housing element cycle, which would be 4,104 over what SCAG is requiring us through our allocation. So again, that speaks to the work that you've done as a commission to help move our city forward and in our residential development standards. So thank you for that. In addition to addressing the RENA, the housing element also identifies 4 goals for this particular planning period. Each goal is coupled with focused policies associated with programs that ensure that the goals are met. Below are the 4 goals that are established during this cycle of the housing element. Creating diverse housing solutions with affordable options for all income groups, minimizing displacement of low-income households. Providing a stable, safe neighborhood where housing is protected, rehabilitated, and modernized. Creating a pathway to home ownership for local renters that strengthens the city's neighborhoods and provide long-term stability to its population. And creating supportive services for low-income households and households with special needs. And so all 4 of these goals are met through policies that were listed in the element as well as in the staff report. And those policies are further cemented by the programming that was established through this element, be it existing and new. And so I just want to highlight really quickly some of the existing programming that's going to be carried over into this next housing element cycle, as well as some of the new programming. We are going to be continuing to operate our property maintenance division, code enforcement. They do a fantastic job in making sure that our properties, stay looking as beautiful as they should be. Graffiti abatement, residential sound installation programs are going to continue. Section 8 home ownership programs are going to continue, and homelessness solutions are going to continue through our housing division. Within this new cycle, we're going to include commercial corridor evaluations, which is very similar to what we've done already in our TOD plans, which is allow residential units along some of our major commercial corridors. Providing a code amendment to regulate ADUs, and we've discussed that in the months past. Creating regulations for short-term rentals. In conjunction with our environmental justice element, creating incentives for energy conservation through development projects, residential development projects. And also, one that's also near and dear to all of our hearts is creating some first-time homebuyer initiative programs that would allow our local residents to be able to move move into home ownership. As mentioned earlier, as of today, no public comments have been received for this amendment. And the general plan amendment is consistent with the general plan as required by state law. And because there was no rezoning required or changes to the physical environment with the development of this housing element, a categorical exemption was prepared. This concludes staff's presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time. Our consultants from the Arroyo Group, who also worked on some of our other TOD plans, is also available should the need arise to ask them questions.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, very good report. We're going to open up for questions for you. And we're going to start with Commissioner Patrick.
I haven't any questions. Thank you. It's a very good report. I was reading a novel, and as I mentioned to you, I put the novel down. I can't find it because I found this much more interesting.
I love
It's
it.
very well written, and I thought it was very interesting and very informative. Everything was set out with the 2 comments I've already given you. But thank you very much. I haven't any other questions.
Commissioner Rice.
I would have been very interested in seeing the video that talked about affordable housing a reality.
Yes.
And how you make that happen. Most of the builders or developers are interested in building potentially affordable housing. Usually it doesn't happen in a lot of cities because the performers don't work. And what does the city do in order to help create an enhancement for the developers so that the performer works and the projects can actually get built?
Yeah, we've been as a city very generous, for lack of a better word, with our density bonus provisions, which allows for the additional units to be built in exchange for some number or level of affordability to be provided. With those density bonuses, the developer also is allowed incentives that also help their project to pencil out, whether it's to make the spaces, the units larger with reduced setbacks or a reduction in the number of parking spaces that are required as a part of the development. And so we work pretty hard and closely with the development community to try to help their projects pencil to the best that we're able to under state law.
The density bonuses, are those only applied to properties within the TOD?
No. The density bonus projects can be applied citywide as long as the project is zoned for residential development.
And I need you to explain something to me. The city is not required to build any projects themselves, but you said there is a requirement that the city provides land for projects to be developed.
So the city is required to provide the capacity to build the number of units. And what we mean by providing the capacity is that through the sites that are available that can be developed through existing zoning, or even in some instances proposed zoning through zone changes, the land area would be available to meet the number of units that can be developed over the 8 years of the planning cycle. It doesn't necessarily mean that the city is building the units or necessarily providing land, which we can through some of the sites that the city owns, but it's not a mandate that the city provides the developers the property. Does that make sense?
But they'd have to provide land, and it may perhaps come back through this body to get approved.
Potentially, but it could also be purchased from a private property owner. So, for example, as a part of this process, we were required to reach out to some of our larger commercial developments that have the capacity to allow for development. For example, the CVS site here on Market Street. Another example would be the new Mark Merrill site, Crenshaw and Imperial. We spoke to Centinela Hospital. We spoke to some of the larger development sites that could, if they so chose to, at some point in time throughout the history of their property, could develop their sites with residential units.
Is that site a reality or hypothetical? Because that site's gonna be developed for the train turnaround or rebuilding or
Could
repairs.
could be in the short term, but in the long term, it could be developed residentially if that happened. So we just need to be able to provide and show evidence that we have the capacity to meet the RENA. There's not necessarily an obligation for us to meet that number. We just have to demonstrate that we can.
Okay, last question, the Plan 5.
One,
I just also add one more thing. For those large sites that we identified as having the potential for housing, it was the the large areas of parking that we had in mind, not removing the existing uses necessarily, but filling in some of those parking with multi-story parking structures and then housing on top of that, but not removing existing uses.
I see, so existing uses where CVS hypothetically is, that would remain, and then housing would go in as
Yes,
parking
or
structures?
if the transit connector was there, the parking that's proposed around it could be structured parking with housing also.
I see, okay. Plan 5, the commercial corridor evaluation, can you explain what that means?
So very similar to what we did with our downtown TOD, as well as Westchester Veterans and Crenshaw Imperial TOD. We'll be looking at some of our major commercial corridors, maybe portions of Centinela that were outside of our TOD boundary. Looking at that to examine the potential for allowing residential developments on some of those commercial corridors. Now, a lot of our commercial corridors are much larger parcels of land, which would allow for higher density and much higher or higher height limitations and things like that. And so that's something that through this housing element cycle, we're going to be examining to potentially provide come with some sort of code amendment that may allow it under certain conditions, and that would come before this body for the recommendation to council.
Okay, no further questions, Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Trio?
First of all, I want to say it's really, I was very, very impressed with the housing element. I know we've touched on it on particularly our TOD plan or element, but this really covered a lot. Certainly learned a lot, and very informative, and I think it really addresses segments of the population here in Inglewood, the low income, very low income, the up and coming, and evidenced by the jump in the units that are being required for Inglewood. I have a couple questions on that. The jump first. It jumped from what, 1,000 plus units for the what's it called, the above moderate income, to 7,400. That tells me that we have above moderate income people wanting to live in Inglewood. Not necessarily just Inglewood residents that maybe are going up into that category, but I think it's attracting others. And that's why I think that made such a significant jump. I didn't know that until you mentioned it right now. But I'm curious, why is Inglewood being asked to provide or make available 7,400 units as opposed to other cities within the South Bay region that are much lower? I'm asking the question, but I'll also give you an observation, and that it strikes me that the requirement for 7,400 units is because of the significant population that is low income, very low income, and they're requiring Inglewood to come up with a significant number of units, and there's no guarantee that that significant jump in the above moderate income will be okay, thank you. That it will be for Inglewood residents. I mean, how do I put this? They're requiring Inglewood to provide more affordable housing units than, say, Manhattan Beach. Okay? When children of Manhattan Beach residents grow up and say, I want to live in the area, they can't probably buy a house in Manhattan Beach. The closest place would be in Inglewood because it'll be affordable. More affordable than the limited number that will be required in the more affluent communities. Why? It doesn't sound fair to me. I know life is not fair, but it does not sound fair to me that Inglewood carry the burden of providing so many units, so many more than the other cities in the South Bay region. Comments maybe on that?
Yeah, I can add some information. So this RENA cycle, all the cities in SCAG and really all the cities across California got hit pretty much equally in terms of the percent increase that they saw the last cycle versus now. If you look at pretty much any city's number, we spot checked a number of cities when we were starting this process, and we saw the same overall percent increase, even like the breakdown of the different affordability levels. They were kind of broken down in the same percentages within each city. That being said, there are a number of I think all the cities in the South Bay region all have lower numbers than Inglewood. And I mean, the allocation is developed by SCAG. They calculate it based on a number of factors such as land area, I believe area zoned for particular uses, number of jobs, proximity to transit. So they factor in a number of things to come up with their breakdown. That being said, they go through a process before releasing every RENA where they do a lot of outreach to collect comments on the fairness of the RENA allocation. And I know they're getting started for the next one currently. They're in the very, very early stages, but we can make sure to connect you with that information, the whole commission, to the extent you're interested in participating in that through SCAG.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. And I particularly brought it up because at the recent COG, and I keep forgetting what COG stands for, but meeting that was held, I guess it was last week, and they gave the numbers of units required for each South Bay city. And I just, Inglewood is really high. Really high. And to me, it strikes me that a factor, I don't know if that's the case or not, a factor for requiring the units is income. We have lower income here. People make less money here. So is it, for lack of a better term, keeping poor in the poor area? That's what that was the first thing that struck me. I mean, I don't consider Inglewood being a poor area. I mean, there may be some lower income areas, but anyway, it's my comment on that it seems very unfair. And I think that there should be an opportunity to perhaps look at it, come up with a different formula, because Inglewood really is changing, and I think others will take advantage of it from other cities.
Yeah, and just so it's clear, everybody felt exactly the same way as you felt. So I listened to a number of meetings across not just the South Bay, but up and down the state. And as you know, the state at the legislative level has been very aggressive to minimize individual municipalities' ability to be able to control where residential goes. So while we have tried to work together to try and address some of the kind of global issues that are happening at the state level. We also are in a unique position as a city because of the amazing opportunities that have presented themselves here to be able to address some of these issues without, blinking. Some cities are just struggling trying to figure out what that means for them. In other words, there are bedroom communities, some of which you mentioned. They don't have, they're not necessarily very large in acreage, but if you look at the per residential lot size, huge compared to most others. So what that essentially means is there's either going to be a huge lawsuit, which, by the way, those things are circulating, or there's going to be a change in what is the traditional suburban environment that we see in some of those communities. And we are aware of that. We have commented and communicated. One of the things that we, from a planning perspective, clearly understood, we've been fighting since I was in undergraduate school for jobs, housing, balance. That's a big part of a city being really viable, so that you don't have a lot of this transient activity that goes on where people are living out in no negativity towards Moreno Valley, but out in Moreno Valley and then driving into the city and then going back. We want to keep our population local. So we feel we can do it in a diverse population. Our property values are increasing. One of the reasons why you see such an emphasis on home ownership. It's a key element there. And you mentioned something that was very interesting, and I'll comment on this and stop. That you indicated that other folks in some communities will choose to come to live in Inglewood because they can't afford to live in their own communities, and particularly those who kind of grew up there. And that's an unfortunate casualty to those communities. We're seeing some of those communities are going to suffer as a result of that because a lot of their creativity and a lot of those sales tax dollars are not going to go to those communities anymore. So we have to balance those types of things off. Plus, those parents might just leave those kids those properties. We know that kind of happens, and give them a leg up. It's $3 million, and they give them $2.5 million of it to qualify. So we see that happening as well. But I think the interesting thing in closing is that those individuals are looking at Inglewood as a viable place to live, and that's to be commended for our leadership. That's huge. We'll protect those other types of things that are trying to attack us. We're going to make sure we do that. This doesn't obligate us to do any of those things. We're vetting all of our projects for affordability. We're looking at mixed projects so you're not just creating large. I grew up in Nickerson Gardens housing projects. We're not interested in doing that. We're not going to do that as long as I'm here, at least. And not that there was anything bad about Nickerson housing project, but that we understand that you need to have a balance in anything. So we're certainly trying to allocate that to the housing element. So.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Again, that was some of the first thing that came to mind. I have just a couple of things. Let's see, on the programs, on page 5 of 8, the goal number 4, where it says, to implement the city's housing policy, 36 programs have been defined that will advance all the city's housing goals. And although numerically there are 36, there are 2 missing, number 22 and number 27. And then also in the resolution, it mentions 34 programs. So I think it has to be consistent because the city staff report is part of the consideration that the Planning Commission takes into consideration if adopting. And then the resolution, of course, is what approves it. So I think it has to be consistent. And one other comment on the resolution, and I had it a minute ago, and page 2 of the resolution, section 1, number 3. It says the housing element general plan amendment is substantially compatible with the unnamed portions. I'm very uncomfortable with with it being unnamed, because it could be unnamed, anything. So I think that that has to be clarified, that if it relates to the 7 other elements in the general plan, then it should specify the 7 other elements as opposed to unnamed portions.
And that language can actually just be removed if you chose to strike it. We can just take it out, the unnamed portions. So just refer to the general plan, which would include all the existing elements automatically.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Shaw Williams?
Yes, I just have a question. You were talking about looking for potential land for housing. You talked about Imperial Crenshaw, if they chose to use that particular shopping center for developing housing. I was just curious, there's land between Morningside, Woodworth, and Monroe. A lot of land there. Has that ever been discussed or considered for potential housing?
It's not included as potential sites in the school. Since it's owned by the school district and we presume planned for educational purposes. So it hasn't been included as a potential site
Okay.
or any of the school district sites.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you and staff for actually putting the packages together for us. This report that we received, I enjoyed it. I don't know about it being one of my best sellers, like Commissioner Patrick, but it was a good report. A couple of questions that I have, and I think we spoke about it, was the housing mechanism, and you did answer those questions. Thank you very much. I have a question in regards to sound installation, because that's one of the programs. On the sound installation programs, is it extended out to, because right now we have it in a certain area of the city, would it be expanded to other portions of the city? That's my question. And if not, why not? And if not, how can it be?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. So the RSI program is a defined program. You know, it comes out of a lawsuit between the Los Angeles War Airport and the city of Inglewood and other cities. We were just one of the cities. And so there was a clear delineation of the scope and the standard of that program. To the efforts of the mayor and the council and the director, Ms. Betty Griffith, that program actually got extended. So it's actually beyond its lifespan if you were to simply look at it in terms of chronological time. And so the director has worked alongside with LAWA and FAA to secure additional funds to assist in expanding the program. Those are on a case-by-case basis. The program is funded through LAWA, and those monies have to be agreed upon by LAWA above and beyond what the lawsuit stipulated to. So Ms. Griffith, as the director, is working diligently, I know because I talk to her all the time, of expanding it to areas. There are details involved with that because the point of the RS program is not for you to have a nice house, it's to have sound insulation because of noise propagation in the city. So just to have it is not really the purpose. The purpose is to mitigate sound noise that's outside the residential home or the commercial home. She's trying to expand it to churches and things like that. So that's the point. So to the point of it being expanded, there are areas within our community that are not impacted negatively. And when I say negatively, to the extreme level of what we see in the lawsuit. And those areas have traditionally not been included. And it's not that the city wouldn't love to see all of it done, but we're dealing with a bucket of funds that have restrictions on them. So we have and continue to work with the residential sound installation to come up creative ways. Betty Griffin and I and staff are talking about that all the time so that we can expand the program. But there's nothing in this document that would mandate that beyond what she's able to accomplish with the agreements. So hopefully that's kind of a general answer to the question.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. The next question I have is in regards to housing and down payment assistance. Would the city be able to provide, or is it in this plan to provide down payment assistance for low to moderate income families?
So there is a first-time homebuyers program that's listed within the housing element, and it's going to, it's a new program, and so it's going to be implemented. The brass tacks and the details on how that program is going to manifest itself throughout this cycle has not been ironed out yet. But it is a proposed program that has a implementation schedule attached to it, and so we'll work towards with the necessary departments to make that a reality.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to go back down and find out if we have any further questions for either you, or you indicated that, who'd you indicate was on the phone?
The Arroyo Group, our
Yeah, the Royal
consultants.
Group. Let me ask the commissioners first. Do you have any questions for the Royal Group? Commissioner Patrick? Commissioner Rice?
I haven't any.
Commissioner Trio?
No.
Commissioner Shaw Williams?
I do not.
Wow, I love this group. Okay, so we have any questions for the staff at this particular point? Commissioner Patrick?
I do not, thank you.
Commissioner Rice?
No.
Commissioner Trio?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Shaw Williams?
No, I do not.
Okay. Okay.
Commissioner, if I may, just want to clarify that there are a total of 36 programs that are implemented, that will be implemented within, are proposed to be implemented within this housing element. The two that were accidentally omitted were the RSI program.
Of course.
Was program number 22, and program number 27 was the housing protection ordinance, rental protection ordinance. So.
I'm just curious, why would they take that out? I mean,
Yeah.
those are very important.
Oh yeah, no, it was just in the oversight.
Oversight, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I have no further questions, so is there a motion on the floor?
I move.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
my bad. You know, this Monday meeting is kind of strange. I'm normally looking at a football game or something. Operator, can you open up the phone lines? If there's anyone wishing to address the Planning Commission on this particular item, may do so at this time.
Absolutely. If you wish to make a comment, please press #2 on your telephone keypad and your line will be unmuted. Once again, please press #2 if you wish to make a comment. And there are no callers in the queue.
Okay, thank you. We're going to close this segment, and at this point, we're going to see if there's a motion on the floor.
I move that we affirm categorical exemption EACE 2023-002 and adopt a resolution recommending City Council adoption of GPA 2023-001 with the slight modification and wording in the staff report and the resolution to provide consistency in the number of programs under goal number 4 of the staff report, and clarifying wording, clarifying the wording to delete unnamed portions under section 1, number 3 of the resolution.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved in second. We'll call for any questions. Hearing none, we'll call for a vote.
Commissioner Patrick,
Aye.
Commissioner Rice,
Aye.
Commissioner Trejo,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw Williams,
Aye.
Chairman Springs.
Aye. Ms. Wilcox?
Yes, Chairman, this item has no appeal procedure, so it will proceed automatically to the City Council for their consideration.
Okay, very good. Okay, we're going to open it up for commissions initiatives. We'll start off with Commissioner Patrick.
Football time again. I haven't any, just everyone have a great week, and let's get ready for the Super Bowl.
Commissioner Rice,
No initiatives at this time.
Commissioner Trejo,
I don't have anything at this time, thank you.
Commissioner Shaw Williams,
Just have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you.
and I have no questions either. This is a great meeting. This meeting is adjourned.